They called me dead weight while using my license to stay legal. My name is Graham Ellis. I'm 45 years old. For the last 17 years, I held a position most people couldn't quite explain. Even HR struggled to summarize it. They used terms like regulatory architecture or compliance systems director. But what I really did was simple. I kept the company legal. Not by shouting at board meetings or leading high-profile launches. I did it by maintaining the network of federal licenses, certifications, and compliance renewals that let our systems stay operational. No license, no product. No product, no company. Most people never saw that part, and the ones who did thought it was boring. So when Matt showed up, young sharp suit, MBA buzzword still fresh on his breath, I knew exactly what was coming. They called it a strategic audit of legacy roles. That's code. In corporate language, it means we're getting rid of anyone who doesn't look good in a startup slideshow. I didn't flinch. I'd seen his kind before. Guys who think agile means moving fast even when they're sprinting toward a cliff. It started on a Tuesday. I was halfway through verifying a set of FDA renewal dates when the screen flickered and the video call booted up. Matt introduced himself with the kind of smirk people practice in front of mirrors. "Hey team, I'm here to streamline operations and eliminate process redundancy." There it was. The word redundancy. That word has never once led to a raise. I listened. Quiet. His eyes scanned the screen like he was picking furniture to throw out. When they landed on me, he smiled. Legacy overhead, that's what he called me. I didn't say a word. Just opened a folder on my local drive one I hadn't touched in years. It was labeled Muffin Recipes. Inside every federal license file, renewal schedules, internal timestamps, signatory chains, all tied to one name, mine. I exported the entire archive to a private cloud. Encrypted, zipped, backed up 3 times. I wasn't going to fight them, but I wasn't going to walk out blind either. By lunchtime, I overheard Matt joking in the break room with 2 junior analysts. They were talking about phasing out boomer infrastructure. I'm 45. But in Matt's world, if you don't make TikToks about your workflow, you're a fossil. Later that day, I saw the schedule update. A full team huddle. Open floor. The kind of thing that always feels like a celebration but ends like an execution. Matt walked in with a deck full of vague promises. Decentralized accountability. Compliance agility. Adaptive integration. It was noise. Then came the line I knew was coming. Some of our team members, especially those with legacy responsibilities, will be reassessed to ensure alignment with our lean strategy. He looked right at me when he said it. People shifted in their seats. A few glanced my way. I didn't blink. That night I stayed late. Not because anyone asked me to. I just wanted to watch the system breathe one last time. I logged into the dashboard I built back in 2016. The one that connected every license to its expiration jurisdiction and sign-off trail. 43 active items, each one essential, each one tethered to my federal clearance ID. I double-checked the audit timestamps, confirmed they were still tied to my signature, still valid. Then I pulled up my employment contract, scrolled to the clause nobody ever read, Section 9.B3. In the event of involuntary termination, all federal and state certifications maintained in Ellis's name shall auto-expire within 48 hours of contract nullification unless otherwise reassigned by certified authority. Nobody had reassigned anything. Nobody could. I was the only one certified. The next morning, Matt assigned my inspection prep to a marketing intern. She asked if the FDA meant food design aesthetics. I didn't respond. Instead, I logged into a terminal on the 3rd floor. Admin override still worked. I revoked her access quietly. If they were going to cut me out, I wasn't going to leave the map behind. At 6:47 p.m., I received a calendar invite. Subject line, streamlining continuation, role transition discussion. I already knew what it meant. I showed up on time, no laptop, no folder, just a pen. Matt was already seated, pretending to scroll through something. He looked up. "Graham, You've been here a long time. 17 years, I said. Right. Institutional knowledge. We really value that. He didn't say anything else, just motioned to HR. 2 reps entered holding a printed termination packet. No warning. No discussion. Just process. I signed it in one motion, then looked up and said, "I'll need a printed copy." Matt blinked. "It's all digital now." I said printed. 4 minutes later, I walked out with a stapled receipt. Silent, calm, done. They didn't know it yet, but when I signed that form, the countdown had started. Every license, every renewal, every operational credential they relied on would vanish in less than 48 hours, and no one else had the authority to bring them back. If you've ever been called obsolete by people who ran on systems you built, subscribe. We've only just begun. I came in the next morning like I always did. Same jacket, same black coffee, same 7:46 arrival. No one made eye contact. That wasn't new. But the silence felt sharper. Like everyone had just remembered they left the stove on. Matt had already taken over the conference room by then. Glass walls, ring light. He stood there adjusting his collar before a video call, nodding at his own reflection like he was about to pitch a crypto startup. Outside, the juniors were huddled around a printout of one of my old flowcharts. One of them laughed. "This thing uses color codes like a Crayola box." Another added, whoever made this still timestamps everything manually. Like, does she even know what Zapier is?" They thought I wasn't listening. Or maybe they thought I was already gone. I didn't correct them. Didn't tell them that I made that chart. Didn't tell them it had once passed a federal inspection with 0 flags. Or that manual timestamps were a legal requirement for 2 of our largest government clients. Instead, I walked past. Quiet. Back straight. But I felt it. That burn between the shoulder blades. The kind you get when people don't just underestimate you. They mock what they don't understand. Later that day, I was reassigned. Not officially, just quietly through a calendar shift. My name was removed from the next round of inspection prep. The intern, Emily, I think, was listed as lead. She hadn't even finished onboarding. Meanwhile, I was tasked with foundational inventory optimization. In plain terms, reorganizing the janitor closet. Matt framed it as a chance to engage at a grassroots level. Said it would help me reconnect with operational reality. I nodded once, didn't argue, but inside something settled. Not anger, not spite, just a calm, steady realization. They've already decided I'm out. I just haven't left the room yet. I checked the compliance dashboard after lunch. Access denied. Error 4003. Authorization revoked. It was the same dashboard I had designed, the same one I had maintained for nearly a decade. Now locked. No warning, no email, no explanation. I tried the backup admin panel. The shadow access point. Still worked. Of course it did. I had written that code myself in 2017. Never documented it. Never shared it. Sometimes you build quiet exits just in case you're ever shown one. I logged in, scanned the license registry, and saw that everything was still active. Still tied to my name. Still set to auto-expire in 35 hours. Nothing they did from the outside could change that. Not without federal clearance. And not without me. Around 4:15, I walked past Matt's office. He was on a call, laughing, something about cleaning out the dead wood. He didn't see me. Didn't notice the folder in my hand. Or the printed copy of the full compliance architecture, an archive of every integration, every renewal path, every active cert. I slid it into my bag, walked back to my desk, and opened a second terminal. This one wasn't on the company network. Personal VPN. Air-gapped drive. Paranoia, maybe. Or maybe I just knew what came next. I ran a test of the revocation protocol. Dry run only. No live triggers. But the system responded clean. Timed as expected. Every credential tied to my name would be nullified at the same moment. One sweep, like pulling a circuit breaker. The office emptied out slowly. People heading home. Some to families. Some to Tinder dates. Matt probably to a rooftop bar with other people who say thought leader without flinching. I stayed behind. Not because I needed to, because I wanted to see the system one more time. Not the people, the logic, the bones. It was still solid, still mine. Before I left, I opened the HR folder they'd handed me. Inside termination clause, benefits, summary, and exit checklist. But no mention of Section 9B3. No one had read it. They'd walked me out of the building without knowing what I took with me. Not data, not hardware, not secrets. I took the one thing they assumed was automatic authority. And by this time tomorrow, they'd realize what happens when that authority vanishes. It started small, most collapses do. The day after I signed the termination form, I walked in at 8:02. A little later than usual. I figured I'd earned the extra 20 minutes. No one said anything. Not even a nod. That wasn't new. But now it had a different texture. Guilt or suspicion. Hard to tell the difference from silence. I sat down at my old desk, even though no one had confirmed whether I was still expected to show up. The badge still worked. For now. My inbox had 6 unread messages, all from internal departments, all forwarded requests that used to come to me directly. One was from procurement, asking about an updated license ID for a recurring vendor. They'd copied Matt and a new compliance analyst named Chloe. I recognized the contract code immediately. It was one of the accounts I had handled personally for over a decade. A supplier of biofiltration membranes for our medical clients regulated by both the FDA and the Federal Logistics Commission. Highly restricted material. Couldn't even request shipment without 3 active credentials. I clicked reply all. Then I paused and clicked discard. Not my problem anymore. By noon I got a Slack message from Chloe. It was short. Hey, do you know where the Q3 license renewal table lives? That table had over 400 variables. It was updated weekly. It required triple sign-off before every cycle. I didn't respond. Around 2:30, Matt stopped by my desk. No warning. Just that fake friendly voice he used when he wanted something. Hey Graham, how's things? I looked up. Fine. Listen. I think we might have accidentally removed some of your dashboard permissions too early. We're routing a few things through Chloe now, but if you could just send over the core license structure. Nothing fancy, just the essentials, that'd be great. I nodded once, didn't speak, didn't blink. Just clicked open a blank notepad window and typed 4 words. Talk to legal first. Turned the screen to face him, waited. He squinted at it. What's this? That's my response. He opened his mouth like he was going to say something, then didn't. He walked away. Quick steps. No eye contact. At 4:12 p.m. I logged into the Shadow admin panel one last time. The system was stable. No external overrides had been triggered. No one had tried to revoke my control manually. They wouldn't know how. I ran a ping to check the revocation chain. 43 licenses. All live. All set to auto-expire in less than 30 hours. I left a final note in the system logs. Encrypted. Time-stamped. Line read authorization trails intact. Pending natural decay. No one would see it unless they looked for it. And no one ever did. By the time I shut my laptop, most of the office had cleared out. I walked past the operations wing. Matt was still inside. On another call. He paced while talking like that helped his words carry more weight. I didn't listen. I didn't care. As I stepped out of the building, I saw the sky start to turn. Gray. Not stormy, just neutral. The kind of weather that doesn't announce itself. It just settles in quietly and changes everything without permission. The next morning, I didn't go to the office. No one told me not to, but I figured they wouldn't notice, and they didn't. I spent the day doing nothing special. Read some old audit notes, made lunch, checked the timestamp on my email confirmation. The clause would execute itself automatically at 7:13 p.m. that night. No button to push, no code to run, just silence and time. They still thought I was in the system, still thought the licenses were stable, still believed they could patch together some new org chart and route compliance through interns and templates. But the system didn't work like that. Not legally, not operationally. The credentials were bound to a single certifying officer. That officer had a federal ID. That federal ID was mine. And soon, It wouldn't be. At 7:13 p.m., my phone buzzed. One message, no subject, no sender. Just this. License chain CN8845 to 8861 has been marked non-compliant. Revocation certified. Entity status inactive. I stared at it for a long time. Not because I was surprised, but because of how clean it was. How quiet. I closed my eyes, leaned back in the chair, and for the first time in weeks I slept early. The office always smelled like recycled air and ambition. On good days it reminded me of focus. On bad days it felt like a waiting room for layoffs. That morning I wasn't there to smell it, but I knew what it would feel like. Quiet. Uneasy. Like the system knew something was wrong before the people did. The first public signal came just before 9:00 a.m. Procurement tried to confirm shipment of restricted filtration materials. Standard process, 3 sign-offs, 1 active license, 2 compliance confirmations. The vendor's response was blunt. Request denied. Receiving entity listed as inactive. License ID CN8845 expired. Certifying Officer Graham Ellis. Status revoked. That was the first crack, a small one. Most didn't see it, or didn't want to. They tried again. Resent the form. Tried updating the contact field. Same result. Then came the dashboard. The one they'd stripped from me. The one that used to show a sea of green. That morning it lit up in red. Not all at once. Just slowly, row by row. 1 expired license, then 2, then 12. By 9:26 a.m., the system was choking on its own error codes. Matt tried to keep the tone upbeat. He gathered the team for what he called a momentum sink. Open floor, glass walls. Everyone standing like bad news couldn't reach you if you didn't sit down. Let's start with some candor, he said, which is what people say when they're about to bury you in optimism. We've identified a few system misalignments, nothing critical, just residual noise from our legacy structure. He kept using that word, legacy, like I'd left behind a pile of old shoes, not the backbone of their compliance engine. A few interns nodded. Buzzwords tend to sound smarter when you don't understand the systems behind them. Clue raised her hand, hesitant. She had that look people get when they realize they've been handed something radioactive. Some of the auto-renewals are failing, she said. The platform's rejecting credentials. Matt gave her that management smile. The kind that's mostly teeth and no answers. Just a permissions hiccup, he said. Reassign the contact fields. Try again. She nodded, but I imagine her stomach didn't. Because once the federal system logs a revoked license reassigning, it isn't just a form. It's a process, one that takes weeks, and requires a certified officer. They didn't have one. Back at home, I watched it all unfold from a safe distance. Not through screens, through silence. Nobody called, nobody emailed, not yet. But I could feel it, that hum in the air when people realized the rules they thought were bendable weren't. I made another cup of coffee, sat on the porch, and waited. By noon, Matt had escalated. He called legal. He called IT. He called compliance. None of them had answers. He even tried logging into the licensing dashboard again, used his own credentials, got blocked, tried my old credentials, got flagged. The system wasn't just declining input. It was blacklisting attempts. That's how I built it. Once a revoked cert was triggered, any unauthorized re-entry would trip the audit flags. Standard security. Invisible until it mattered. Now it mattered. At 2:07 p.m., Chloe sent a Slack message to the compliance thread. I saw a copy later forwarded by someone who still had a spine. Does anyone know how to override a full chain expiration event? Asking for leadership. No one answered. What could they say? They didn't know how the system worked. Only how to stand in front of it and pretend they were in charge. That afternoon, Matt held a closed-door meeting. He framed it as a strategic reset. Said we were evolving toward decentralized accountability. That process realignment would be handled cross-functionally. Translated, that meant no one knew what the hell was going on. But they weren't ready to admit it. So they spun it, polished it, named it something hopeful. But the numbers didn't care. The systems didn't care. And the vendors, they definitely didn't care. All they saw were expired credentials, missing certifications, and a growing list of transactions labeled pending reauthorization, no valid officer on file. By 4:35 p.m., someone finally called the regulatory board, asked about reinstating credentials, asked if the termination could be walked back. They were told the same thing I already knew. Mr. Ellis voluntarily relinquished his licensing authority under Federal Clause 9.b3. Per regulation, reinstatement requires full recertification. Average processing time 4 to 6 weeks. Silence followed. I wasn't there, but I could hear it anyway. Not the kind of silence that waits for a fix. The kind that realizes there is none. I turned off my phone. Let the day end on its own. No updates, no alerts, no responses. Just systems doing what they were built to do. And a company slowly realizing they hadn't just fired a man. They'd removed the only name that still meant authorized. It happened quietly, like most real damage does. No alarms, no headlines. Just one trigger buried in the middle of a standard termination clause. Section 9.b3. It was never meant to be theatrical, just clear. Upon involuntary termination, all federal and state certifications maintained in the employee's name shall expire within 48 hours unless legally reassigned by a certified authority. No one read it. No one reassigned anything. And 48 hours after I signed, the clock ran out. It was 7:13 p.m. on a Thursday. I wasn't watching the system when it happened. Didn't need to. Instead, I was sitting on the balcony, legs up, old mug in my hand. The kind you never wash with soap, just hot water and routine. The air was still, just barely warm enough to feel like spring. Then came the ping. Not from work. From the Federal Compliance Board, encrypted, single line of text. All credentials under ID, GR4172E, have been formally revoked. Entity dependencies have been marked inactive. That was it. No animation, no drama. But behind that message, a quiet cascade had begun. One the system couldn't stop. One no one there could fix. At 8:04 p.m., the procurement system attempted to route a purchase order through the vendor compliance portal. Failed. The vendor's system ran an auto check. Detected the expired license. Flagged the order. Internal status rejected. No valid compliance officer. At 8:37 p.m., the dashboard sent out its first real error to executive leadership. A red banner across the top. Compliance status uncertified. License chain orphaned. I'd written that label myself. 3 years ago. Most people never saw it. Most never needed to. Until now. That same evening, someone tried to override the compliance lockout. Likely IT. Maybe Matt. They used my old credentials. Or tried to. Got flagged. System locked their IP. Logged the attempt under unauthorized access. Revoked credential reuse. By 10:12 p.m., audit scheduling tools began to error out. One tried syncing with the FDA portal. Returned rejection code, invalid signatory chain. Another flagged a mismatch on chain of custody documents. Not expired, erased. There's a difference. Expired implies it once had validity. Erased means it never existed in an operational state again. Legally, that distinction matters. A lot. Meanwhile, I was in the kitchen, making a sandwich. The kind you only make when you know no one else will see it. Simple. Efficient. I didn't check my phone again. Didn't log into the system. There was nothing left to verify. The clause had done its job. The system was following instructions. Everything was exactly where it needed to be. By morning, the cleanup had started. But they didn't know it was a cleanup yet. They thought it was just a bug. Or a sync delay. Or maybe a permissions issue. People always reach for simple answers when the structure begins to collapse. They assume the center will hold, that things will fix themselves, that someone knows what's going on. But this time no one did, because the only person who had written the fallback path was gone. At 9:16 a.m., someone forwarded a client escalation email. One of our medical device partners couldn't submit their end-of-quarter report to regulators. The compliance signature field was blank. Autofill failed. Manual override disabled. Their email was terse. Please confirm whether your compliance infrastructure is still legally certified. If not, our engagement will be paused effective immediately. That's what compliance means. It isn't about ticking boxes. It's about being allowed to operate at all. I checked the weather around noon. Cloudy, quiet. The kind of sky that mirrors the inside of a boardroom when no one knows what to say. They still hadn't called, still hadn't emailed. Maybe they were too proud. Maybe they thought they'd figure it out. Or maybe they hadn't realized just how deep the rot went. I sat back down at the kitchen table, opened an old folder from my personal archive. Inside the full compliance blueprint, annotated, version controlled, stamped with every major system change since 2015. I ran my finger down the edge of the paper, paused at the section marked Termination Protocol, and I smiled. Not because I was proud, not because I was vindicated, but because it worked. Not the revenge, the system, the logic, the clause. It worked. Tuesday didn't start with a bang. It started with a meeting request. Matt labeled it Urgent System Realignment. Set it for 900 sharp. Open floor, no agenda. That told me everything I needed to know. It wasn't a meeting. It was a fire drill. And the smoke had already made it to the top floor. By then, I wasn't checking company emails. But someone had blind copied me on a thread. Just one message. Is there any legal way to retroactively restore Ellis's certs? Response number Federal Clause 9.b3 is self-executing and irreversible without full recertification. Silence. It wasn't panic yet, but it was close. 9:04 a.m. Procurement flagged a second vendor. This one handled chemical sterilization supplies. They refused shipment, same reason. Receiving entity non-compliant. License expired. No authorized certifying officer on file. Legal forwarded the rejection to Matt with a note, need clarification on who holds this chain now. Matt responded, working on it. He wasn't. He was in a room full of people pretending the problem wasn't foundational. By 9:21, the dashboard, once a clean map of green status blocks, looked like it had been punched in the gut. Flags everywhere. Red where there should have been green. Gray where there should have been names. No one said it out loud, but someone whispered it. He was the certifying officer for all of this. The he was me. And yes, I was. And now I wasn't. 9:27. Matt walked into the ops wing with a to-go coffee and a plan that didn't exist. We're going to manually reassign credentials, he said. Just need everyone to stay calm and focused. This is a workflow issue, not a compliance collapse. Renee, one of the newer analysts, stood frozen with a report in her hand. She'd tried to update the contact info on one of the forms. The platform rejected her. Sir, she said carefully, updating contacts requires reauthorization by a certified officer. Graham was the officer. Matt blinked. So do it anyway. She didn't move. Sir, no one else on file is certified. Legal jumped in. Suggested they reach out to the regulatory board. Request emergency reinstatement. So they did. 3 transfers later, someone finally answered. Mr. Ellis voluntarily relinquished his license authority. His ID has been fully removed from the registry. To reinstate credentials, the individual must reapply and complete recertification. Estimated processing time is 4 to 6 weeks. That landed like a stone in water. Silent impact, then ripples. Matt stood up from the conference table, walked to the whiteboard, started drawing boxes, as if the right diagram would solve the absence of federal authority. 10:03 a.m., a new email landed in the audit queue. Subject line, FDA randomized site inspection, 24 AR notice. Target our main facility. Time 10:00 a.m. the next day. I hadn't scheduled it, but I'd planned for it. 3 years ago. Randomized, yes. But always within predictable windows. Always lined up with license renewal cycles. Which meant they were now scheduled for a full federal audit, without a legal compliance officer, and without any way to get one in time. That was when the panic began to show. Not on emails, in faces. Someone pulled Matt into a side room, one of the VPs. She closed the door, hands tight, voice low. I imagine she asked the obvious question. Why didn't you check his contract? Who signed off on his removal? Why didn't we have a backup? And I imagine Matt said what people like him always say. I thought we could just reassign it, as if federal licenses were email aliases. as if compliance was something you could delegate to marketing interns. Later that afternoon, I got a text. Unknown number. Graham, I know things didn't end well, but would you be open to a call, no pressure? I didn't respond. By 4:00 p.m., 3 clients had paused projects. 1 issued a formal letter of concern. The other 2 didn't even bother explaining. They just shut the portal access. Every product we sold depended on active federal certification, not just for manufacturing, but for distribution, for billing, for insurability. When the license goes down, the contracts go with it. I stayed offline the rest of the day. Didn't need to refresh anything. Systems run on logic, people run on ego, and both eventually hit a wall. If you've ever watched someone cut the oxygen line thinking it was just another wire, you'll understand why I didn't stop them. Subscribe if you're still with me. The next part. That's when the collapse gets loud. Wednesday morning came dressed like any other, but the air in the building had changed. People still moved fast, still typed hard. But under it all, you could feel it. A shift. The kind you only notice after the break has already happened. The first sign wasn't in a report. It was in a face. Renee looked up from her monitor around 8:20. Her screen glowed red: compliance exceptions, stack overflow logs, 2 vendor alerts, and escalation mode. She didn't say anything. Didn't ask for help. Just stared at the blinking interface like it might start speaking English if she waited long enough. That's how people look when they're finally out of excuses. Matt was in the executive huddle room. The glass-walled one with the fake plant and the coffee that always tasted like cardboard. He was pacing, laptop open, phone in hand. I wasn't there, but I didn't need to be. I knew the walk, knew the speed of it, knew how it changed when someone was trying to act calm while calculating disaster behind their eyes. 9:02 a.m., the front desk buzzed up to operations. 3 federal inspectors here. Credentials confirmed. Requesting access to secured audit wing. That was it. Just 1 sentence. But it hit like a siren. Matt left the room before the message even finished transmitting. No jacket, just movement. He headed straight for legal. Someone tried to intercept him, one of the senior associates. She held a folder. Probably the updated compliance snapshot. Matt brushed past her. Didn't stop. Didn't ask. He was already sweating, and the day had barely started. By 9:15, the inspectors were seated in the waiting lounge. 3 of them. Clipped badges, standard audit gear. They didn't smile. Didn't small talk. Didn't care who had been promoted or whose project got funding last quarter. They only cared about one thing: access. Compliance officers are required to escort inspections. That's not optional. It's federal chain of custody protocol, and there was no one to do it. Renee tried to stall. Asked if they'd be okay with coffee. They declined. Asked if someone else could step in temporarily. They repeated the policy. Only certified officers. No exceptions. Matt went back to his laptop. Tried to log into the licensing portal again. Blocked. He attempted a credential reset. Got bounced. He called the Federal Credentialing Board. Transferred twice. Then told flatly, Mr. Ellis's credentials were voluntarily rescinded. His registry ID has been formally removed. Reinstatement requires full recertification. We do not offer emergency overrides. By 10:12 a.m., HR pulled up my termination packet. Legal scanned every page. No one could find the clause. Not at first. It was buried. Section 9B3. Same place it had always been. They read it twice, then a third time. One of them asked aloud, "Did anyone even look at this before we processed it?" No one answered. That's when the CEO arrived. Gregory T. Winslow, tan, polished. Fresh from some international flight that probably cost more than my department's annual software budget. He strolled through the front atrium like nothing was wrong. Shook hands, nodded at people like he still owned the room. Then he reached the executive wing. And the silence hit him. No greetings, no one standing to smile, just glowing screens and unreadable expressions. He stepped into the ops war room, looked around, then asked the question he always asked when something smelled off. Who's handling this? No one spoke. Matt looked down at the floor. Gregory walked to the screen, tapped open a dashboard view. Paused. License status is revoked. Inactive. Orphaned. He clicked through them one by one, then slowly turned back to the room. You fired the license holder. Not a question, a realization. Matt opened his mouth, closed it, swallowed hard. He had it all tied to his ID. We thought it could be transferred. Gregory didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. He just said, "You don't transfer federal chain authority like a spreadsheet cell." Legal handed him the clause. He read it in silence. Then again, then once more. Finally, he said he built this system. No one denied it. He looked at Matt. "You let a 30-year-old with no certification remove the only person keeping us operational." Matt said nothing. The inspectors were still waiting. At 10:31 a.m., they gave a final notice. If no certified officer arrived in the next 30 minutes, the inspection would be recorded as non-compliant. That triggers cascading alerts. To clients, to partners, to federal regulators, to insurance. Gregory turned to HR. "Contact him." A pause. "He's not responding," someone said. Emails, calls, nothing. Another silence, longer this time. Finally, Gregory spoke. "Get him back." The message came at 11:46 a.m. Subject line: Re-operational restoration proposal. Time sensitive. No greeting, just bullet points. A temporary consulting contract. 6 months. Reduced base pay but performance-based bonuses. Full discretion. Remote optional. And a strict NDA. The last clause read, "All communication with regulatory bodies, clients, or internal departments must be routed through legal or authorized liaison. No interviews, no media contact, no exceptions." They even formatted it in gold. Headers bolded. HR language cleaned up and folded into lawyer speak. A digital bow on a burning building. I read it twice. Then again, just to be sure I wasn't imagining the tone. It wasn't an apology. It wasn't even ownership. It was a request disguised as an opportunity. Like they were doing me a favor by asking me to fix the thing they'd broken. At the bottom of the email, Gregory had typed a short note. "Graham, we recognize the importance of your past work and would value your expertise as we move forward. Let's rebuild together." No signature, just his name typed clean, not even a best. I closed the email, didn't reply, made coffee instead. The kind that takes 5 quiet minutes. Enough time to let the noise pass. Later that day, someone else tried. An old colleague. Liz from documentation. She was one of the good ones. Used to leave sticky notes on my monitor with doodles during audit week. A coffee mug, a smiley face, once even a cat wearing a badge. Her message was different, simple. "Hey, I know this isn't your problem anymore, but they're scrambling. Everything's stalled. I just thought you should know. They're scared, and I think they finally understand." I sat with that one a little longer. Her tone wasn't forced. She wasn't trying to sell me anything, just telling me the weather had changed. At 4:12 p.m., the last email of the day came through. Attached a revised version of the contract. More money, looser restrictions, and a new subject line. "Return requested, CEO directive." It had a timestamp watermark. "Urgent." I opened a new document, typed slowly, one line at a time. Subject: Return requested, CEO directive. "Gregory, I appreciate the offer, truly. But I don't return to burn sites, especially not the ones where I was thrown into the fire. On schedule." Attached you'll find a highlighted copy of Section 9B3 from my original contract. A formal confirmation of license revocation from the Federal Registry Board. A dashboard screenshot pulled 72 hours post-termination where my name still appears grayed out marked irreplaceable. "Wishing you compliance and clarity. Graham Ellis." I didn't reread it, didn't adjust the language, no flares, no threat, no second paragraph. I clicked send and closed the laptop. They didn't respond. Not that day, not the next. But I knew what was happening on their end. Leadership scrambling to reframe the story. Legal scrambling to contain the damage. Project managers trying to salvage timelines with redacted PDFs and substitute names. None of it would hold. Because the name missing from the system wasn't just a person. It was a legal construct. A pillar. You don't just hire that back like a contractor. Not when you've already filed the termination form. Not when the system ran the clause like it was code. And it was. That night I slept early. Didn't check my phone. Didn't refresh the news. Sometimes the most powerful move isn't retaliation. It's stillness. Letting people sit in the consequences they built. By Thursday morning, the silence had been replaced by noise. But not the kind you can manage. Not the kind you can mute. This was systemic, contractual, loud in all the ways that mattered. It started with a flag from Omega Med, one of the crown jewel clients. They emailed procurement, CC'd legal, subject line urgent certification breakdown. Inside a single paragraph, clean, precise. As of this morning, our compliance check has failed for 3 consecutive products. Licensing metadata is showing inactive. Please advise immediately, or we will initiate hold procedures under Clause 14.3 of our vendor agreement. That clause default termination. No discussion. Just a pause on all deliverables, payments, and access. They didn't ask for a fix. They asked for distance. Less than 2 hours later, Viarc followed. Same template. Different words. Same meaning. Certification continuity has lapsed. As such, we are suspending all active collaboration until further notice. The message went to 3 inboxes. 2 bounced. The third was Matt's. He didn't reply. By lunch, 5 more clients had paused projects. 2 flagged breach of contract. 1 initiated legal review. The remaining vendors started pulling logs, data trails, access audits. They weren't waiting for explanations. They were collecting evidence. Someone forwarded me a Slack screenshot. It was Matt pinging legal. Anyone know how to override a license expiry tag in the dashboard thingy? He called it a thingy. The same system that held their entire compliance framework. That dashboard had been mine. I'd written it to be surgical, not dramatic. If a license was revoked, the system didn't just gray it out. It isolated it. Reported the access attempt. Logged the IP. Blacklisted the user if they tried more than once. Matt tried 3 times, then it locked him out. Later that afternoon, I got another quiet forward. This time from someone in upper management. No message, just a thread. 1 line stood out. "Can we get Graham back?" Someone else replied. "Does his NDA prevent him from talking about this?" Another answered. "No, but it prevents us from asking." They were walking on eggshells now, trying to make it look like they hadn't known, as if ignorance could be backdated. At home, I was sitting with a cup of tea. Not coffee this time. Too much adrenaline in the air already. I skimmed through the thread, closed it, didn't respond. By 4:20 p.m., they lost another contract. This one smaller, but it hurt more, because it had been stable. The kind of deal that renews itself every year unless something goes catastrophically wrong. Something had. Internal dashboards lit up with alerts, red tags, missing fields, 0 values in key compliance indicators. The worst part. The automation I'd built was still working. It didn't crash, it didn't break. It simply reflected reality. No license, no authority, no business. They weren't victims of a hack. They weren't sabotaged. They just disconnected the person who held the system together. And now they were realizing that nothing had been transferred. No backup existed. Because the compliance chain wasn't a file. It was a relationship. A structure. A name. Mine. Somewhere between the 6th and 7th client email, Gregory called another emergency meeting. An assistant later told me it lasted less than 15 minutes. No shouting, no accusations. Just a slow realization that the entire operation was out of options. He asked one final question. "What's our exposure?" No one answered. By the end of the day, they stopped sending emails. Stopped trying to call. HR archived my file. Legal drafted language for internal containment. Marketing paused all outbound comms. The audit was still scheduled for Friday morning. But by then, it didn't matter. The damage had already moved upstream. To partners, to regulators, to stakeholders. The ones who didn't ask for explanations, just proof. And what they had now was proof that no one was in charge. That evening, I sat on the couch. Lights off, news on in the background. I didn't listen, didn't need to. I already knew how this story would end. Not with a scandal, not with an exposé, but with a line item in a board meeting. A contract lost, a dashboard offline, a name removed. It started with a calendar ping, 10:00 a.m. Friday. Just a small gray box. FDA randomized inspection, site audit on-site. I wasn't there, but I'd scheduled that box 3 years ago. Randomized doesn't mean unpredictable. It just means the window is controlled by math instead of people. I knew it was coming. They didn't. The inspectors arrived on time, 3 of them. Clipboards, badges, neutral expressions. They didn't need small talk. They weren't there to assess personalities. They were there to validate systems. The kind of audit that doesn't care how hard you've worked, only whether what you built still qualifies as legal. They were met at the front desk, escorted to the waiting room. Standard procedure required one thing: next, a certified compliance officer must be present to guide them through the audit. That was the rule. Written, filed, logged into the Federal Inspection Database. It was the same rule I'd followed every year. Quietly, without fanfare, just doing the job. This time no one showed up. At 10:11, one of the inspectors asked to speak with operations. The request was forwarded to legal. Legal forwarded it to Matt. Matt tried to find Renee. She was already in tears behind a closed door. Someone else had handed her a list of credentials and told her to fill in the blanks. There were too many blanks. At 10:19, the head inspector asked a second time, "Is your certifying officer present?" Silence. A phone rang and no one picked it up. A printer jammed in the hallway. Time passed like fog, slow and thick. At 10:27, they gave final notice. If no certified officer is present by 10:30, the audit will be marked as failed under Federal Code Section 47(9). Still no one came. They waited 3 more minutes. No excuses, no arguments. Just absence. Then they stood up, collected their binders, and left. No shouting, no spectacle. Just a quiet notation in a government database. A flag, a status update, a red mark beside the company's name that wouldn't go away with an apology. At 11:06 a.m., someone called Gregory from the lobby. Told him the audit had officially failed, that the inspection was marked incomplete, that the dashboard was still showing revoked status. Gregory didn't respond, just stared at the table, hands folded. A junior legal associate asked if there was any appeal process. There wasn't. Audit flags are permanent until recertification. That takes time, money, and a certifying officer, none of which they had. At 11:44 a.m., an email landed in my inbox. Subject line: update, site audit outcome, internal use only. I didn't open it. The subject line told me everything. They wouldn't have sent it unless they had to. At 1:22 p.m., someone pinged me on LinkedIn. Short message: "You really designed it to lock down like that?" I didn't reply, didn't need to. The answer was yes. But it wasn't about revenge. It was about integrity. Systems should do what they're meant to, and when they're abused, they should stop working. That's not revenge. That's design. That evening I went for a walk. The air was cool. Late spring kind of cool. Not cold enough to sting, but quiet enough to remind you that not everything needs to be fast. I passed a cafe I used to visit after long compliance days. It still smelled like cinnamon and ground espresso. I didn't go in, just kept walking, hands in pockets. By 6:30, the company's internal dashboards were in full lockdown. Vendor portals flagged, client accounts disabled. No data breach, no outside attack, just a vacancy. The wrong name removed, the right process ignored, and the system doing exactly what it had been built to do: say no. That night, I read a book. Didn't finish it. Didn't need to. The ending was already happening. Not to me, to them. And for once, that was enough. Monday came with no announcements, no statements, no spin. Just silence. And a few small changes that said everything without saying anything. Matt's name disappeared from the internal directory. Not deactivated, removed. Like he'd never existed in the system to begin with. His office was cleared before noon. The glass wiped down. Badge access revoked. No farewell email. No all hands, thank you. Just a closed door and a new nameplate. Associate Project Liaison, Level 2. A demotion, dressed as a role change. The kind of title that comes with a smaller desk and no access to anything that matters. By Tuesday, the executive org chart had been redrawn. Compliance and regulatory had been moved. Not up, not down, just to the side. No longer listed under ops. Now floating under special projects, reporting directly to legal. That meant only one thing. They weren't rebuilding. They were containing. I heard from Liz again. She didn't ask questions, didn't try to pull me back in. She just said one line. They're trying to hire a new certifying officer. But no one wants to take the job. Not after what happened. I didn't blame them. Who would want to sit in a chair wired to a system they didn't understand? It wasn't just about knowing policy. It was about knowing what was buried in the walls, and how it would respond when someone pulled the wrong thread. By midweek, the dashboards had gone dark. Not just offline, visibly hollow. Placeholders where license data used to be. Blank fields, drop-downs that wouldn't populate. Someone had tried to fill them manually. But the system didn't take guesses. It only recognized credentials. And they had none. Vendors stopped calling. Not out of spite, out of protocol. Once you're marked non-compliant in the system, you fall into a different tier. Quarantine. Even if you fix it later, the flag stays visible for 6 months. It follows you. Like a quiet mark of untrustworthiness. Unspoken but never forgotten. At home, I watched the alerts trickle in. Not to my inbox, those had stopped. But through back channels. Slack screenshots. Forwarded messages. The occasional voice memo from someone too tired to write. No one was angry anymore, just quiet. A kind of numb that comes when there's nothing left to spin. No one left to blame, and no clear path forward. On Thursday, someone from a partner firm reached out. Not to ask for help. To check if I was available. We're building out a new compliance architecture. Clean slate. No legacy mess to clean up. No politics. Just structure. Interested. It wasn't flashy, wasn't begging, just an open door. I didn't respond right away. Let the message sit. Not because I was unsure, but because I wanted to feel the weight of leaving something behind. Not walking away in anger, not proving a point, just done. By Friday, the story had made it into trade circles. Nothing scandalous. Just a quiet blurb on a compliance bulletin board. Mid-tier health tech firm fails federal audit. Leadership restructured. Certification strategy under review. That's all it said. But anyone in the field knew what that meant. Failing an FDA audit isn't just paperwork. It's a break in trust. The kind you don't get a second chance to fix quietly. I sat on my balcony that night. Same mug, same chair, same city. But something had shifted. Not around me, in me. The work I'd done was never meant to hurt anyone. It was meant to hold things together. Tightly, consistently, legally. When that kind of structure breaks, it doesn't collapse loudly. It just stops holding. And people fall through the gaps they never bothered to map. 3 weeks later, LinkedIn moved like it always does. Someone changed roles. Someone posted a quote. Someone shared a certificate they probably hadn't read. In between all that noise, my name popped up. New role, new company, new system. The post was short. No hashtags, no fluff. Grateful to join a team where compliance isn't an afterthought. That was all. I didn't add a logo. Didn't tag anyone. Didn't need to. The message wasn't for them. It was for me. The new office was smaller, cleaner, fewer egos, more clarity. No glass walls, no buzzword meetings, just systems. Exactly the kind of place I'd wanted in the beginning, back when I still believed being good at your job was enough to keep it. Stratex Biocore, that was the name. Not flashy, but smart. They had 2 things my old company never understood. Structure and memory. They didn't ask me to rebuild what I'd lost. They asked me to build what I knew should have existed all along. And this time I didn't have to explain why license ownership mattered, or why a clause like 9B3 wasn't overkill. They already knew. That's why they hired me. OmegaMed came over first, then Viarc. 2 vendors, 2 contracts. 2 lines on a dashboard that now glowed clean and green. They didn't ask for discounts. They didn't ask for backstories. They just said, you built it right the first time. We trust you'll do it again. And I would. Back at the old place, things stayed quiet. The dashboards never came back online. The audit remained flagged. The reinstatement process dragged through red tape like a stalled engine. They'd tried replacing the parts, but they never understood how the wiring worked. Someone sent me a screenshot one afternoon, just a corner of the old dashboard, still grayed out, my name still there. Not active, not removed, just grayed. Beside it, certifying officer, status revoked, irreplaceable. No drama, just a line of text in a system I no longer touched, but it still knew me. I printed the screenshot, pushed a blue thumbtack into the corner, pinned it to the wall above my new desk. Not as a trophy, more like a bookmark, a reminder. You don't have to burn the house down to prove it was built wrong. Sometimes it's enough to walk away and let the foundation speak for itself. Gregory never reached out again. Matt's LinkedIn title changed to independent strategy consultant. That's code for no one's hiring me, so I'll hire myself. HR reshuffled. Legal redrafted their exit process. A new clause was added to all future contracts, modeled almost word for word on mine. I didn't feel vindicated. Didn't feel much of anything. That's how quiet wins usually are. They don't come with applause, just breath. The kind that fills your chest without effort. The kind you forget you were holding. One morning I was making coffee in the new office kitchen. No machine, just pour over. Slow, methodical, familiar. Liz sent a message. I left too. Thought you should know. I wrote back. Good. That was it. She didn't need more. Neither did I. A week later, I walked into my new office early. First one in. Windows still fogged. I turned on the lights, checked the server. All green. Licenses current. Cert chains clean. Audit status pre-verified approved. I leaned back, closed my eyes for a second. Above me, the pinned screenshot stayed silent. No blinking, no alert. Just that single gray name, faded but permanent. And below it, the smallest printed sticky note I'd ever made. 5 words. Block letters. No emoji, no signature. I was the license. If you've made it this far, you already know. You don't need the system to recognize you. You just need to build something it can't function without. Subscribe if you believe the quiet ones still win. We're just getting started.